"Don't you see it?" Tyler whispered, his photographer's loupe pressed against the family album page. His hand found mine under the table, squeezing so hard it hurt. "How can you not see it?" I blinked at him, confused. Around us, my family continued their Christmas dinner conversation, Mom refilling wine glasses, Dad nodding at some story about the country club, my sister Sophia laughing at her boyfriend's joke. Normal. Peaceful. But Tyler's shoulders had gone rigid, the way they do when he spots a fatal flaw in a photo shoot. He was studying my childhood pictures with the same intensity he used to examine million-dollar campaign shots. "See what?" I managed. He flipped to another page, then another, his professional magnifying glass catching every detail. "The shadows are all wrong. The lighting doesn't match. Madison, these photos have been digitally composited." My mouth went dry. "What do you mean?" "I mean someone took your face and pasted it into different backgrounds. Professional-level Photoshop work, but obvious once you know what to look for." He kept his voice low, still smiling for my mother's benefit. "That's not photography, that's forgery." The room suddenly felt like it was underwater. My ears started ringing as Tyler discreetly slipped several loose photos from the pile beside the albums, evidence he was gathering in real time. "These aren't memories, Madison," he whispered. "They're fabrications." 2 weeks later, I was sitting in an FBI field office holding DNA test results that proved I wasn't Madison Brooks at all. I was Emma Walsh. And I'd been stolen. Let me back up. Growing up in a McMansion felt like being an expensive prop in someone else's magazine spread, beautiful to look at, but completely hollow inside. I'm Madison Brooks, 28, and for most of my life, I thought I was just the family disappointment. You know the type. Decent job in marketing, reliable fiancé, perfectly adequate life. Nothing spectacular, nothing worth celebrating at those annual Christmas gatherings where my parents beam at my sister Sophia like she hung the moon. That Christmas night when Tyler exposed my fake childhood started like every other holiday at the Brooks family estate in Westchester County. I walked in with shoulders slightly hunched, smile carefully neutral, prepared for another evening of being the family afterthought. Tyler followed behind me, camera bag slung over his shoulder because he never goes anywhere without it. That bag held the photographer's loupe that would change everything. "Madison," my mother, Diane, appeared in her signature cloud of Chanel No. 5 and controlled enthusiasm. Air kisses, perfectly manicured hands briefly touching my shoulders. "You look wonderful, sweetheart. Doesn't she look wonderful, Richard?" My father glanced up from his Wall Street journal long enough to nod. "Of course." Sophia was already positioned in the living room like a beautiful centerpiece, her investment banker boyfriend nodding along to whatever brilliant observation she was making about market trends. She wore something cream-colored and expensive that made her look like she'd stepped out of a Ralph Lauren ad. "Madison." She actually sounded happy to see me, which should have been my first warning sign. "Come sit. We were just talking about the Hamptons house. Remember that summer when you were, 12? You were so funny, always hiding in your room with those books." Always hiding. Right. Not that anyone had ever tried to find me. I counted silently as we settled into dinner conversation. The roast beef was perfect, the wine was French, and the discussion flowed seamlessly from Sophia's latest promotion to the country club's renovation to my parents' upcoming cruise. 9 minutes and 17 seconds before anyone addressed me directly. "How's work, honey?" Mom asked, already turning to refill Sophia's glass before I could answer. "Good. The Peterson campaign launched last week." "That's nice." And scene. Tyler watched this exchange with the same careful attention he gives to lighting setups. I'd brought him because I thought he could anchor me, provide some kind of buffer against the familiar sting of being invisible in my own family. I should have known better. Tyler notices things. It's what makes him brilliant at his job and occasionally uncomfortable to live with. After dinner, Mom did her traditional performance. Oh, I almost forgot. I brought down the photo albums. I thought Tyler might enjoy seeing Madison as a little girl. She said this like it was spontaneous, like she hadn't planned it with military precision. The albums appeared on the coffee table as if by magic, leather-bound and expensive, just like everything else in this house. "I'd love to see them," Tyler said politely, already reaching for his camera bag. That's when Tyler became a detective instead of a dinner guest. I watched more than participated as they flipped through the familiar pages. Baby photos of Sophia, dozens of them. Professional portraits, candid shots, every milestone documented in exhaustive detail. Then came my section. Fewer pages, but the photos were all there. Me at the beach, me on birthdays, me awkwardly smiling at school events. That's when Tyler's entire demeanor changed. He pulled out his photographer's loupe, a professional magnifying glass he uses to check print quality. I'd seen him use it hundreds of times, but never on family photos, never with that particular intensity. "Interesting shadow work here," he murmured, studying one image so closely his nose nearly touched the page. "What's interesting?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he flipped to another photo, then another, examining each one with scientific precision. His shoulders grew tense. I could see the exact moment his expression shifted from curious to concerned to something approaching alarm. Under the table, his hand found mine and squeezed. Hard. "Don't you see the lighting inconsistencies?" he whispered. "See what?" "The shadow angles. They're all wrong for outdoor shots." But before I could press him further, he was already closing the album, smiling blandly at my mother. "Beautiful family photos, Mrs. Brooks. Madison was such a photogenic kid." "Wasn't she?" Mom beamed, though she was always so serious, never wanted to smile for pictures. That was news to me. Every photo showed me smiling. The exact same smile, actually. We left 20 minutes later. Tyler manufactured some excuse about an early morning shoot, and I played along because I'd been playing along my entire life. Mom fussed appropriately, Dad barely looked up from his phone, and Sophia waved goodbye from her position on the couch like a queen dismissing courtiers. In the car, Tyler was silent until we'd pulled out of the driveway. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out several loose photographs. "You took those." I stared at him. "When?" "While your mom was in the kitchen getting dessert. Madison, look at these, really look." The first photo showed me, maybe 7 years old, standing in front of a playground. I was wearing a red dress and that same smile I apparently never wanted to give. "It's just a photo, Tyler." He handed me 2 more. "Same lighting source, different backgrounds, look at the shadows." I looked closer. He was right. The shadows under my feet pointed in completely different directions despite supposedly being taken outdoors on sunny days. The perspective was wrong too. In one photo, I appeared to be looking up at something, but the background showed a level playground. "They're digital composites," Tyler said quietly. "Professional level work, but obvious once you know what to look for. The lighting doesn't match the environments, and the resolution quality is different between the subject and background." He handed me another photo, a baby picture. "That's not you," he said. "Different facial structure, different coloring. I don't think they have any real baby pictures of you." I stared at the images until my eyes started to water. Why would they fake photos? I don't know, but Madison, there's something else. He pulled out his phone, scrolled to his photo gallery, and showed me a picture he'd taken of one of the albums. "Look at the binding dates on these albums. Sophia's baby album was made in 1991 when she was born, but yours, the binding stamp shows 1999. You would have been 5. The air in the car suddenly felt too thin. "So they made my album later. That doesn't mean anything, doesn't it?" I wanted to argue, but the photos were spread across my lap like evidence in a crime scene. My face, copied and pasted into scenes I didn't remember, backgrounds that didn't match, a childhood that had been literally manufactured. "Tyler, you're scaring me." "I'm scared too." We drove the rest of the way home in silence, but my mind was racing. I'd always felt disconnected from my early childhood memories. I'd always assumed it was normal. Who remembers being 3 years old anyway? But now, staring at these obviously fabricated photos, I realized I didn't remember being 5 either. Or 6. Or 7. My first clear memory was of starting 3rd grade. Age 8. Everything before that was just fuzzy impressions and stories other people had told me about myself. Back in our apartment, I spread the photos across our dining table like I was laying out tarot cards. Tyler made coffee while I stared at the evidence of my fictional childhood. "There's something else," I said finally. "I've never seen any legal documents. Birth certificate, social security card, nothing. My parents always said they were keeping everything safe in their safety deposit box." Tyler set down his coffee mug carefully. "Madison, when's the last time you actually saw your birth certificate?" I don't think I ever have." "Don't you need it for things? Passport applications, job background checks?" "My parents always handled that stuff. They said they had copies." I paused, really thinking about it for the first time. "Actually, I've never even applied for a passport. They always said we'd travel when I was older, but then Sophia came along and what? And suddenly there wasn't money for family trips anymore, or so they said. Tyler pulled out his laptop. What's your social security number? I rattled it off without thinking. He typed it into some kind of search engine I'd never seen before. Tyler, what are you doing? Background check software. I use it sometimes for commercial shoots when I need to verify client information. He frowned at the screen. Madison, this is concerning. What's concerning? Your social security number. It was issued in New York, but not until 1999. You would have been 5. Most people get their SSN when they're babies, or at least by the time they start school. The room started to feel smaller. Maybe my parents just filed the paperwork late. Maybe. But Tyler's expression suggested he didn't believe that any more than I did. I excused myself to use the bathroom, but really I needed a moment to breathe. Staring at myself in the mirror, I tried to see what Tyler had seen in those photos. What had been so obvious to him but invisible to me? That's when it hit me. I didn't look like either of my parents, not even a little bit. Sophia was practically my mother's clone, same bone structure, same coloring, same elegant hands. But me. I had dark hair where they were blonde, green eyes where theirs were blue, olive skin that tanned easily while they burned. I'd always been told I took after my father's side of the family, but I'd never met any of my father's relatives. They were all back in Ireland, according to family lore. Too far away to visit, no longer in touch. How convenient. When I came back to the living room, Tyler was on his phone. Who are you calling? My college roommate. He works for a private investigation firm now. Tyler, no, we can't. Madison, listen to me. He put the phone down and took my hands. I think you were adopted, or something worse. Something worse? I think you were taken. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire I couldn't see yet. I wanted to laugh, to tell him he was being paranoid, to remind him that this was real life and not one of his documentary projects. But I couldn't, because deep down, in a place I'd never let myself explore, those words felt true. People don't just steal children, Tyler. Yes, they do, especially people with money and connections, especially when there's something to gain. What could they possibly gain from me? I'm nobody special. Tyler's expression shifted to something I'd never seen before, pity mixed with determination. Madison, your parents live in a $5 million house in Westchester County. Your father is a senior partner at Morrison, Klein & Associates. Your mother sits on the board of 3 different charities. They belong to a country club that charges $50,000 just for membership. So where do you think that money came from? I blinked. Dad's law practice, Mom's family money. Are you sure about that? And for the first time in my life, I realized I wasn't sure about anything. Tyler made the call. His friend agreed to do some preliminary research, nothing official, just checking public records. We agreed to wait 48 hours for answers. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those photos. My face perfectly preserved in digital amber, surrounded by lies. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I spent the day researching adoption procedures, missing children databases, anything that might explain what was happening to me. Tyler worked from home, periodically checking his messages for updates from his investigator friend. At 3 p.m., his phone rang. Madison, you need to hear this. He put the call on speaker. A man's voice, professional but kind. Tyler, I've got some preliminary information about Madison Brooks, and honestly, it's pretty concerning. My hands started shaking. Her birth certificate was filed in 1999 when she would have been 5 years old. That's unusual but not unheard of. Sometimes people lose documents or have issues with delayed reporting. But here's the thing, there's no hospital record of her birth. No doctor's records. No insurance claims related to any childbirth for Diane Brooks in 1994. Tyler reached for my hand. What else? The Social Security number was issued at the same time as the birth certificate. Again, highly unusual. And I found something else interesting. In 1999, Richard Brooks became the legal trustee for a substantial inheritance, roughly $15 million, for a trust that required specific beneficiaries to be present to access the full amount. My mouth went dry. $15 million? The timing is suspicious. New child identity appears in 1999, sudden access to trust funds, no paper trail before that year. I'd recommend getting a DNA test and contacting law enforcement. This has all the hallmarks of identity fraud, possibly something much worse. After he hung up, Tyler and I sat in silence for a long time. $15 million, I said finally. $15 million in 1999, probably worth $28 million now with conservative investment growth. So they stole me for money. It looks that way. The anger hit me like a physical force. 23 years of feeling like a disappointment, like a burden, like something they'd settled for. And all along, I'd been their golden ticket. I need to know who I really am. Tyler nodded slowly. Then let's find out. We contacted the local police first, who immediately escalated the case to the FBI due to the interstate implications and potential federal crimes. It took 2 weeks to arrange for legal DNA testing through proper channels, not the express processing you see on TV, but thorough, court-admissible evidence. While we waited, the private investigator continued digging. What he found made my hands shake. I found her, he told us over a secure phone call. Catherine Walsh. She was 32 in 1999, working as a nurse in San Francisco. She had a daughter who disappeared from a daycare center that year. Emma Walsh, age 5. Is she still alive? I asked. Very much so. She lives in Portland now, works at a children's hospital, never married, no other children. Madison, I think she's been looking for you for 23 years. The investigator had done more than just find her. He'd uncovered the real story behind the inheritance. Catherine's grandfather died in early 1999 and left a trust fund worth $15 million. But here's the key. The trust was specifically established for Catherine Walsh and her daughter Emma Walsh as joint beneficiaries. The legal language required both parties to be present and verified to access the full amount. Tyler and I looked at each other. They didn't just take me, I whispered. They needed me to unlock the inheritance. There's more, the investigator continued. Richard Brooks was Catherine Walsh's lawyer. He was handling the trust paperwork when Emma disappeared. He would have known exactly how much money was involved and what the requirements were. The room started spinning. He was her lawyer. He had access to all the details. All he had to do was produce Emma Walsh. The problem was Emma had vanished, so he created Madison Brooks instead. I thought I was going to be sick. Using me? Using you, but we'll need DNA confirmation to prove it in court. The DNA test results came back on a Thursday morning. Tyler and I sat in the FBI field office in White Plains, surrounded by case files and federal agents who'd been investigating the Brooks family for 3 weeks. 99.97% probability that Catherine Walsh is your biological mother, the lab technician announced. You are Emma Walsh. I stared at the results until the numbers blurred together. 23 years of my life had been built on a lie. Not just any lie, a criminal conspiracy that had stolen my identity, my family, and my inheritance. But more than that, they'd stolen my mother's life too. The FBI agent handling our case leaned forward. Ms. Walsh, we've been building a comprehensive case against Richard and Diane Brooks. Wire fraud, identity theft, kidnapping, conspiracy. The charges are extensive, but we'd like your permission to contact your mother directly. Finding her phone number felt surreal. The FBI arranged the first contact for security reasons. They needed to verify her identity and ensure this wasn't some elaborate fraud attempt. I listened on speakerphone as Agent Rodriguez made the call. Ms. Walsh, this is Agent Rodriguez with the FBI. I'm calling about your daughter Emma. Silence. Then a sound I'll never forget, a sharp intake of breath followed by something that might have been a sob. You found her. Is she alive? Is she safe? She's safe, Ms. Walsh. She's been living under a different identity, but she's alive and well. We're going to let her speak to you now. The agent handed me the phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. Hello? Emma. My Emma, I think so. My name is Madison Brooks, but I think you're my mother. Oh my God, where have you been? I've been looking for you for so long. I told her everything. The photos, the fake documents, the inheritance, all of it. She listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of recognition or anger. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. I knew, she said finally. I knew Richard Brooks had something to do with your disappearance, but I could never prove it. And by the time I had enough money to hire a real investigator, you'd vanished completely into a new identity. What do you mean? Madison Brooks didn't exist before 1999. I've been looking for Emma Walsh, not knowing you'd been turned into someone else entirely. We arranged to meet the following weekend. She flew in from Portland, and Tyler and I picked her up at the airport under FBI supervision. They were still concerned about security until the case was fully resolved. I recognized her immediately. Not from memory, I'd been too young, but from looking in the mirror. We had the same eyes, the same bone structure, the same way of standing with one hip slightly forward. She dropped her bag and just stared at me for a long moment. "You're so beautiful," she whispered. "You look exactly like my mother." We hugged in the middle of the airport terminal, both of us crying, while Tyler documented everything with his camera and federal agents maintained discreet surveillance. The case moved quickly once we had DNA confirmation. Richard and Diane Brooks were arrested simultaneously at their country club during what they thought was a routine dinner with friends. They were denied bail due to flight risk. Turns out they'd maintained active bank accounts in the Cayman Islands for years. The investigation revealed the full scope of their crime. They'd used Richard's position as Catherine's lawyer to study her routine, identify vulnerabilities, and plan the abduction. They'd taken me from daycare by presenting forged court documents claiming temporary custody pending an emergency custody hearing. They'd sedated me during transport to New York and kept me confused and disoriented for weeks while establishing my new identity. The psychological manipulation had been as systematic as the legal fraud, creating false memories, destroying any trace of Emma Walsh, and building Madison Brooks from the ground up. The inheritance money had funded their entire lifestyle. Not just the house and country club, but Sophia's private schools, their charitable contributions, which enhanced their social standing, everything. They'd built their perfect life on stolen foundations. But here's the thing about stolen foundations, they crumble eventually. The trial lasted 8 months. Richard Brooks was convicted on federal charges including kidnapping, wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. He was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Diane received 15 years as an accessory after the fact. Under federal sentencing guidelines, with good time credits, Richard's earliest possible release would be in approximately 21 years. Diane could potentially be released in 13. The federal system had abolished parole years ago, but supervised release remained a possibility. They lost everything. The house, the cars, the country club membership, all of it seized to pay restitution. The inheritance money, what remained after 23 years of funding their lifestyle, came back to me. The original $15 million had been conservatively invested by the trustee overseeing Catherine's grandfather's estate. With compound growth over 23 years, it was now worth approximately $28 million. I was suddenly worth $28 million, but more importantly, I had my mother back. Catherine and I spent hours filling in the gaps. She told me about my first 5 years, how I'd loved books, how I'd insisted on wearing the same red sweater every day, how I'd cried inconsolably when we had to leave my favorite stuffed elephant at her apartment when we moved. "You were so bright," she said, tears in her eyes. "You could read before you turned 4. You asked questions about everything, and you had this laugh, this wonderful, infectious laugh that made everyone around you happy." I told her about growing up as Madison Brooks, the loneliness, the feeling of never quite fitting, the constant sense that something was wrong. "I felt it too," she said. "Like half of me was missing. I knew you were out there somewhere. I never stopped believing it." Sophia's reaction was more complex than I'd anticipated. The revelation that her entire family wealth was built on kidnapping sent her into psychological crisis. She took a leave of absence from her investment firm and spent months in therapy processing the betrayal. "I'm not angry at you," she told me during one of our careful conversations. "I'm angry at them, and I'm angry at myself for never questioning why you seemed so separate from us. You were just a kid too. I was old enough to know something wasn't right. The way they treated you versus how they treated me, it was obvious, and I chose to ignore it because it benefited me." That admission meant more to me than any apology could have. The psychological evaluation process was extensive. Both Catherine and I underwent counseling to help us navigate rebuilding a mother-daughter relationship 23 years after it was severed. She still saw the 5-year-old who disappeared. I was trying to reconcile the fantasy mother I'd dreamed about with the real woman who was funny and stubborn and occasionally burned the lasagna. Tyler and I postponed our wedding for a year while I figured out who Emma Walsh was supposed to be. We used some of the inheritance money to buy a house in Portland, near Catherine. The rest we invested carefully. I'd learned the hard way not to trust anyone else with financial planning. The legal process of reclaiming my identity took months. Officially changing my name back to Emma Walsh required court proceedings, updated documentation, and coordination with multiple federal agencies. The FBI helped expedite the process given the circumstances. Catherine walked me down the aisle at our small wedding. She wore the same shade of blue she'd been wearing the day I was taken. She'd told me she'd kept that dress for 23 years, hoping someday she'd have a reason to wear it for me again. My wedding was everything the Brooks family gatherings had never been. Intimate, genuine, filled with people who actually knew and loved me. Not the performance piece my childhood had been, but something real. Sometimes people ask if I'm angry about the 23 years I lost. The truth is, I'm not angry about the time, I'm angry about the lie. I'm angry about my mother spending 23 years wondering if her daughter was alive. I'm angry about being raised by people who saw me as nothing more than a key to a vault. But I'm not angry about who I became during those years. Those experiences, as difficult as they were, made me strong enough to survive the truth, made me independent enough to build my own life, made me grateful enough to appreciate what I have now. Catherine and I have dinner every Sunday. We're learning to be mother and daughter again, 2 decades later. It's awkward sometimes. She still sees the 5-year-old who disappeared, and I'm still figuring out how to be someone's daughter after 23 years of being an afterthought. But we're family, real family. The kind that chooses to show up for each other, not the kind that treats you like an investment strategy. The Brooks family empire built on stolen innocence collapsed completely. And honestly, I don't feel guilty about it for a second. They built their dream life on the ashes of mine and my mother's nightmare. When their world crumbled, I felt something I'd never experienced before: justice. The $28 million sitting in my investment account represents more than money. It represents the life I should have had, the mother who never stopped looking for me, and the future I get to choose for myself. All because Tyler brought his photographer's loupe to Christmas dinner and noticed that my childhood shadows were pointing in the wrong direction. Some discoveries don't come with dramatic music. Sometimes they come with a professional photographer's eye for detail and the courage to whisper, "Don't you see it?" And once you see it, you can never unsee it again. Did I go too far when I destroyed the family that raised me, or not far enough? The $28 million and the mother who never stopped looking for me suggest I got exactly what I deserved, my life back plus interest. And that's a story worth telling.